Today, Bitcoin jumps as Americans cast their votes in the 2024 election. Ex-Binance chief Changpeng Zhao files a motion to dismiss an SEC lawsuit. And Marta Belcher of Filecoin Foundation discusses blockchain's potential to secure election data. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Tanea McKeel. Cryptocurrencies are rising as the 2024 election draws to a close. By noon Eastern, Bitcoin jumped back above $70,000, about a 3% increase. Meanwhile, Ether rose 2% to $24.61, and XRP gained a more modest 0.8%. Meme coins are also jumping this morning as we wait to see if Donald Trump or Kamala Harris will take the White House in January. Dogecoin surged 12% in the past 24 hours, and Shiba Inu coin climbed 9%. Okay, let's talk about the top stories. A collection of crypto firms, including Kraken and Robinhood, introduced a joint US dollar-pegged stablecoin network. Global Dollar Network is now available on an invite-only basis and will also coincide with the launch of stablecoin USDG issued out of Singapore by Paxos. Paxos didn't provide a public release date, but says the stablecoin will soon be available across all named distribution partners. USDG is entering a market dominated by stablecoins Tether and USDC, which are the two largest dollar-backed tokens by market cap. Barclays said in a note that Robinhood could stand to benefit from this launch thanks to the company's customer-friendly approach to pricing and revenue sharing. Next, Binance and its former CEO Changpeng Zhao are hoping to secure a dismissal of a lawsuit brought by the SEC. Yesterday, lawyers representing the defendants filed a motion to dismiss the SEC's amended complaint from last month. The regulator initially charged the company and its founder in June of last year of 13 counts, including allegations of misrepresenting trading controls and oversight on Binance US and offering and selling unregistered securities. Yesterday's filing argues the complaint continues to insist that virtually all transactions involving crypto assets are securities transactions, despite the court rejecting the regulator's, quote, initial attempt to conflate crypto assets with investment contracts. CZ recently served a 4-month prison sentence as part of a settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice, separate from the legal fight with the SEC. He also stepped down from his CEO role as part of the settlement, and the company has since been led by Richard Tang. All right, for our main story, millions of Americans are headed to the polls to cast their vote in the 2024 election. I spoke with Marta Belcher, president of Filecoin Foundation, to find out why she thinks the company could help store election data on the blockchain. All right, Marta, thank you so much for joining us today. We are talking about a corner of crypto that we don't talk about very much on the show, and that has to do with storage and data preservation. So looking at the Filecoin mission statement, you guys talk about preserving humanity's most important information. Tell me a little bit more about that, what exactly that means, why it matters, and what Filecoin or the Filecoin Foundation's role in that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. So for Filecoin, you can think of it a little bit like Airbnb for file storage. So basically, when people have extra storage space on their computer hardware, they can rent it out to other people who pay them in Filecoin and use the programmability of cryptocurrency to make sure that files are stored reliably over time. And that might sound a little bit like a niche use case, but to us, this is really critical as a piece of infrastructure for the next generation of the web, right? Because right now, if you go to a website, almost always it's actually being stored on a server owned by one of three companies, Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. And so we really envision a version of the web where people are in control of their own data. And we see Filecoin as a critical piece of infrastructure, which both enables the next generation of the web and also allows us to preserve important information by having many, many copies of it all over the world, not controlled by just a few companies.
Okay, and then let's take it back even further. This might be very basic for some of our audience, but what are some of the pillars of blockchain technology or of the Filecoin network itself that are so important to this cause? Why do we need this technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that's so amazing about cryptocurrency and the thing that is so exciting to me beyond financial use cases is the fact that it lets you program your money. right? So you could write a computer program that says, for every second of a song that I play, automatically transfer a millionth of a cent to the songwriter. And that can all happen instantly and automatically. And so we really tap into that programmability with Filecoin. And basically what we do is you can think of it's a little more complicated than this, but you can think of it like a computer program that's saying, okay, please store my file and then check every X amount of minutes. Is the file still being stored? Yes. Okay. Transfer cryptocurrency, right? So it really enables that that kind of use case. And in addition to that, you can actually have people use Filecoin, use cryptocurrency as collateral, right? So they can post collateral and say, I'm going to store your file, I'm going to post collateral. And if the computer program looks and says, oh, actually, you're not storing the file anymore, that collateral is gone. So what that means is you can actually create this incentivized network where people are deeply incentivized to actually continuously store files. So it's actually in a lot of ways much safer and more secure. And when you add to that, that if you have really important data that you really, really want to make sure you preserve, you can actually store it all over the world. You can store many copies in many different places and have that incentive to make sure it's stored over time. It really enables you to store important files, which is why the Filecoin network has been used in a variety of cases where you really want to make sure files stay online. For example, the USC Shoah Foundation uses it to store genocide survivor testimony. We also have evidence of war crimes being stored on the Filecoin network in Ukraine as another example. So this is really a use case that is well beyond finance that is enabled by the power of cryptocurrency.
It is election day here in the US, so put this into that context for me. The context of election data and securing voter data, and are there any organizations out there that are using Filecoin to secure election data?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a bunch of use cases that are building on top of the Filecoin network and utilize the Filecoin network for storage that use not just the storage of the Filecoin network, but also the fact that when you have data, you can, and it's stored on the Filecoin network, each piece of data is content addressed, which means if you change even a little bit of that data, the content address changes. And so you can basically cryptographically prove that data has not been tampered with. And so there are a variety of organizations, many of them are nonprofits, that are building on the Filecoin network that are basically using that cryptographic proof. So to give you a couple of examples. Ushahidi is an organization that basically helps to store citizen-generated data. And it recently launched its Election Data Resilience Initiative, which stores crowdsourced election reports on Filecoin. So that is a way of identifying trends that can really inform the democratic process. We also have, building on the Filecoin network, the Guardian Project, which created something called proof mode. And that basically enables, again, this verifiable documentation building on the Filecoin network. And they made sure to release this sort of open source mobile camera app and toolkit and protocol that adds verifiable digital proof to any kind of data. Right. And they released this in advance of the US election. So it basically can instantly create and share a fingerprint using Filecoin and IPFS, which underlies Filecoin, to be used to make sure that the data, which in this case could be election data, is actually verifiable.
We see these new use cases all of the time, and to a certain extent, it sometimes sounds like it's too good to be true. So what are some of the challenges that you've had that you have been working on, and some of the, sort of downside risks that you guys are working through?
So when it comes to the challenges, one of the things before we built Filecoin, before the Filecoin community built Filecoin, the community developed a thing called IPFS, the Interplanetary File System. And that's the thing that underlies Filecoin. So that's the decentralized file storage network. And then Filecoin sits on top of that as like an incentive layer. And with IPFS, there really is this challenge where it's a decentralized file storage network. People can sort of store their files on other people's computer hardware, just to simplify a little bit. And when people actually go to a particular content ID, they can pull data from anyone's hardware who has that content ID. So you're not just when it comes to sort of pulling data, you're not going to a web address and going to a particular server in a particular location, probably hosted by Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. Instead, you're just looking for a particular piece of content, and then you're actually pulling that piece of content from wherever's closest or whatever is easiest. And so with IPFS, the only issue is you really have to rely on people to store that data, right? So if people decide they don't want to store the data anymore, and you go to that content address and no one is storing it, like it's just gone, right? In a way that isn't necessarily the case on something like AWS. And so that is why we built, the community built Filecoin on top of IPFS, is basically to add those incentives. Because when you have decentralized file storage, that's great. But if you don't have those incentives built on top, you don't have that kind of reliability to know that your data is actually going to be stored reliably.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today. We'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.